Thank you, Nina and Ricky. Good evening, everyone. I'm Alma Angeles for NET25 World News. On tonight's headlines. First tonight, a sharp disagreement between the U.S. and Ukraine. President Trump is publicly criticizing President Zelensky's stance on Crimea, saying the territory status is not even a point of discussion. And that's creating a new tension in the search for a resolution to the war. Take a look.
The president's frustrated. His patience is running very thin. He wants to do what's right for the world. He wants to see peace. He wants to see the killing stop. But you need both sides of the war willing to do that. And unfortunately, President Zelensky seems to be moving in the wrong direction.
And now, turning to the wildfire that is prompting serious concern in New Jersey. Authorities are now saying the blaze raging through the Pinelands has the potential to be the most significant the state has seen in 20 years.
About 11,500 acres and 30% containment. We fully expect that number will grow, that we will see ultimately, when all is said and done, a greater number of acreage affected, and this could very well end up being the largest wildfire in New Jersey in 20 years.
Remember yesterday's report on the powerful magnitude 6.2 earthquake in western Turkey? Well, today we're getting a clearer picture of the immediate impact. And it's quite something. In fact, one TV station even caught the moment their anchors were visibly shaken live on air. And the news starts now. First tonight, a sharp disagreement between the U.S. and Ukraine. President Trump is publicly criticizing President Zelensky's stance on Crimea, saying the territory status is not even a point of discussion. And that's creating new tensions in the search for a resolution to the war. Take a look.
U.S. President Donald Trump and Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky clashed again on Wednesday on efforts to end the three-year-old war in Ukraine. Trump chided Zelensky in a Truth Social post for refusing to recognize Russia's occupation of Crimea. He said the territory was lost years ago and, quote, is not even a point of discussion. White House spokesperson Caroline Leavitt elaborated in comments to reporters.
The president's frustrated. His patience is running very thin. He wants to do what's right for the world. He wants to see peace. He wants to see the killing stopped. But you need both sides of the war willing to do that. And unfortunately, President Zelensky seems to be moving in the wrong direction.
Zelensky said this week that Ukraine will not recognize Russia's annexation of Crimea.
Ukraine does not legally recognize the occupation of Crimea. There's nothing to talk about. This is beyond our constitution. It's our territory. The territory of the people of Ukraine.
His chief of staff said in a post on X that he stressed to the U.S. in talks Wednesday that Ukraine will stand firm on its principles regarding sovereignty and territorial integrity. Nevertheless, Ukraine's foreign minister said after those discussions that Kiev was committed to working with the U.S. to achieve peace.
Meanwhile, efforts to reignite peace talks in the Ukraine conflict appear to be facing significant hurdles. While U.S., Ukrainian, and European officials met today, skepticism remains high, particularly after the cancellation of a key U.S. trip. Meanwhile, President Putin acknowledged weapon shortages within his own forces. Take a look.
Russian President Vladimir Putin told a meeting of the State Military-Industrial Commission Wednesday that Russian armed forces were still short of certain weapons, including drones, despite a big boost in production.
These weapons are still lacking. I know about the efforts being made by the Ministry of Defense and the Minister by Industrial Enterprises. There are plans. Work is being done every day, in fact, and I am sure that all plans to increase production of the necessary equipment, in this case these drones, will certainly be fulfilled.
The discussion occurred the same day Ukrainian officials said a Russian drone hit a bus, killing 9 workers, as the war between the two countries continues. Meanwhile, U.S., Ukrainian, and European officials held meetings on Wednesday to try to get peace talks back on track. after the cancellation of U.S. Secretary of State Marco Rubio's trip raised questions over how much progress was being made. The director of the Russian and Eurasia program at Chatham House, James Nixie, was not optimistic.
I think really we're heading away from negotiations right now and back into conflict without a foreseeable end. Not to say again that the two sides can go on forever, but they've both got more left in them, militarily speaking.
U.S. President Donald Trump warned that Washington could walk away if there was no progress on a deal soon. He raised the pressure on Sunday when he said he hoped Moscow and Kiev would make a deal this week to end the three-year conflict. At the heart of Wednesday's talks was an attempt to establish what Ukraine can possibly accept. After Trump's special envoy Steve Witkoff presented proposals to a similar session in Paris last week. 3 diplomats said those proposals appeared to demand more concessions from Ukraine than Russia.
The US just wants any deal. And that, it doesn't matter whether it's a good deal for Ukraine or a good deal for Russia, they want to be able to show that they are a broker and maybe a power player, that they can have an influence on events. There's a real difference there, because for the Ukrainians, a bad deal is worse than no deal.
Sources said Witkoff's proposals, which included recognizing Russia's annexation of Crimea and ruling out Ukraine's NATO membership, were unacceptable to Ukraine and other European nations.
And we're seeing some sharp words exchanged between Moscow and Kiev today. Russian officials are claiming that President Zelensky's recent refusal to acknowledge Russia's control over Crimea is derailing any chance of a peace agreement.
Ukraine does not legally recognize the occupation of Crimea. There's nothing to talk about. This is beyond our constitution. It's our territory. The territory of the people of Ukraine.
С каждым часом, с каждой секундой становится...
Zelensky has categorically refused to make any concessions and has declared legal non-recognition of Crimea as part of Russia. He showed his willingness in demonstrative way to hold talks only about ceasefire and only on his, Zelensky's, terms. This schizophrenic approach of Kiev's regime showed one more time the absolute inability to negotiate, the irresponsibility and the desire to make this massacre until the last Ukrainian soldier.
And we're still following a significant escalation in the Ukraine conflict. Overnight, Russia launched a massive missile and drone attack on Kiev, now confirmed to have killed at least 9 people and injured over 70, including children. The intensity of this strike has prompted a swift reaction from Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky, who has cut short an international trip to return to the capital. The scene in Kiev remains critical as rescue teams continue to search for survivors trapped beneath the rubble of buildings ripped apart by the Russian bombardment, with one resident describing windows and doors being blown out by successive blasts. Ukrainian officials say Russia launched a staggering 215 drones and missiles in this overnight barrage, though the air defenses did manage to intercept a number of them. This devastating attack comes against a backdrop of increasingly complex international efforts to find a path towards peace. And as we have been reporting, there have been discussions about potential peace proposals, even one suggesting territorial concessions. However, President Zelensky has firmly rejected any notion of ceding Ukrainian land, particularly the Crimean Peninsula, a stance that has drawn criticism from some international figures who believe it's prolonging the conflict. Tragically, the impact of Russia's overnight attacks wasn't limited to Kiev. Multiple other regions across Ukraine were also hit. Kharkiv in the northeast faced repeated drone and missile strikes that damaged residential areas, civilian infrastructure, and injured at least 1 person. And There are also reports of a disturbing incident in the Zhytomyr region, where Russian forces reportedly launched a second strike targeting emergency crews who were already responding to an earlier fire, injuring a rescue worker. Even Ukraine's railway system experienced damage in the Kiev and Kharkiv regions, though officials say train operations are continuing. And now we're following breaking news regarding President Trump's recent announcement of a proposed 145% tariff on all Chinese goods entering the United States. The key questions now, will either the U.S. or China back down? And are Presidents Trump and Xi engaged in direct talks?
Can you clarify, Mr. President, on China?
Yeah, we are going to have a fair deal with China. It's going to be fair.
Are you talking to them actively now?
Actively. Everything's active. Everybody wants to be a part of what we're doing.
China, however, has remained defiant. A spokesperson stated this.
If the U.S. truly wants to resolve issues through dialogue and negotiation, it should stop making threats and resorting to coercion, and engage with China on the basis of equality, mutual respect, and mutual benefit. Saying they want to reach an agreement with China while continuing to apply maximum pressure is not the right way to deal with China, and it will not work.
The economic impact of these tariffs is already being felt. The stock market has experienced its worst April in over half a century, with fears of inflation and recession mounting. Major retailers, including Walmart, Target, and Home Depot, have met with President Trump, warning that the tariffs could lead to empty store shelves across the country. A recent poll also indicates that only 37% of Americans approve of the president's handling of the economy, a significant drop that could have implications for his re-election campaign. Treasury Secretary Scott Bessent echoed a shift in tone from the administration.
America first does not mean America alone. To the contrary, it is a call for deeper collaboration and mutual respect among trade partners. Far from stepping back, America First seeks to expand U.S. leadership in international institutions like the IMF and the World Bank. By embracing a stronger leadership role, America First seeks to restore fairness to the international economic system.
When questioned about the possibility of reducing the 145% tariffs on Chinese goods,
how soon do you want to bring the tariffs on Chinese goods?
Well, that depends on them. We have a situation where we have a very, very great place. It's called the United States of America, and it's been ripped off for years and years. These people know it. We talked about it before you came in. We've been ripped off by every country in the world.
As both nations signal a willingness to engage in dialogue, the world watches closely to see if these tensions can be resolved through negotiation or if they will escalate further, impacting the global economy. Elon Musk is making some changes to his busy schedule. He's announced he'll be significantly cutting back the time he spends working with the Trump administration starting next month and focusing more on his various companies, especially Tesla.
The large slug of work necessary to get the Doge team in place and working in the government to get the financial house in order is mostly done. So I think I'll continue to spend, a day or two per week on government matters for as long as the president would like me to do so, and as long as it is useful. But starting next month, I'll be allocating far more of my time to Tesla.
Well, first of all, I can't speak more highly about any individual. He's an incredible guy. He's a brilliant guy. He's a wonderful person. I've seen him with his family. I've seen him with a lot of his children. He's got a lot of children. He treats them good. He loves his children. But he's a brilliant guy, and he was a tremendous help both in the campaign and in what he's done with Doge. And we're talking about almost $200 billion and rising fast, because many of the things that we were looking at are now being found out to be fact. It's terrible. I mean, the fraud, the waste.
And now, turning to the wildfire that is prompting serious concern in New Jersey. Authorities are now saying the blaze raging through the Pinelands has the potential to be the most significant the state has seen in 20 years, with over 12,500 acres already consumed. Take a look.
And this could very well end up being the largest wildfire in New Jersey in 20 years.
New Jersey officials on Wednesday said a massive wildfire burning in the state's Pinelands was on track to become one of the worst in state history. The Jones Road wildfire had consumed some 12,500 acres and was 40% contained as of Wednesday afternoon. Bill Donnelly is New Jersey's Forest Fire Service Chief.
You guys have to remember, New Jersey has some of the most volatile wildland fuels in the entire country. You know, everybody's used to seeing California and things like that, that chaparral that burns up them hills and goes crazy. Well, these pine barrens out here are the exact same type of fuel model. They are just like having napalm spread across the ground. It's, you know, in the right conditions, when humidity's low and fires become wind-driven, it's just, you can see, you can have catastrophic fires as a result of those conditions coming together.
Donnelly said that so far this year, New Jersey has experienced nearly twice as many wildfires than usual. The latest blaze started on Tuesday in the Greenwood Forest Wildlife Management Area in Ocean County, about halfway between Asbury Park and Atlantic City.
A forest to contain this fire, it still grew to be a large wildfire. So our initial attack efforts failed because of extreme fire behavior, dry, droughty fuels, spring fire season, windy, low RH, which is relative humidity. So we had difficulty containing it to our initial box.
The fire is expected to continue to burn for several days until rain comes on Friday or Saturday. It was no longer threatening populated areas. The cause of the fire remains under investigation.
Remember yesterday's report on the powerful magnitude 6.2 earthquake in western Turkey? Well, today we're getting a clearer picture of the immediate impact. And it's quite something. In fact, one TV station even caught the moment their anchors were visibly shaken live on air. Take a look.
A 6.2 magnitude earthquake rocked western Turkey on Wednesday, one of the strongest in years. A live broadcast by Echo TV caught the moment anchors were taken by surprise by the sudden shaking. The epicenter of the quake was about 50 miles west of Istanbul. The city's governor's office said more than 150 people were injured and receiving treatment in hospitals after leaping from buildings in panic. None were in critical condition, it added. While some shops closed, there was no damage to energy or water infrastructure in the city. CCTV video in Bursa, Turkey, showed people fleeing stores as the quake hit. After the quake, people gathered in parks and stood outside their homes across western Turkey. Some Istanbul residents waited out the aftershocks that continued to be felt on the European side of the city.
It started with a big shock all of a sudden, and we felt it very strongly. I ran straight to my dog with fear, hugged it, and we waited for it to end, lying on the ground. After that, we actually took our belongings and went straight to the street. We have been in the park for a few hours. I don't know how many hours it has been. I think we will stay here a little longer today.
President Tayyip Erdogan said surveying efforts were underway and that the situation didn't appear to be problematic. Wednesday's quake comes about 2 years after the country suffered the deadliest and most destructive earthquake in its modern history. The 7.8 magnitude quake that struck southern Turkey and northern Syria in February 2023 killed more than 55,000 people and injured more than 107,000. Hundreds of thousands of people remain displaced.
And the news continues here on NET25. We'll be right back. We go now to South Korea, where their data watchdogs have made some serious findings against the Chinese AI startup DeepSeek. Now, they say the company was taking user information and even the questions people were asking the AI and sending it off without permission, while the app was still up for grabs in their app stores.
Initially, DeepSeek transferred personal information to companies located in China and the United States without obtaining consent from users for overseas transfers or disclosing it in the privacy policy at the time of service initiation. It has been confirmed that DeepSeek is transmitting device information, network information, app information, and the content users input into AI prompts to Beijing Volcano Engine Technology Company, Ltd. Based on the above inspection results, the Personal Information Protection Commission has decided to issue a corrective recommendation for DeepSeek to ensure legal grounds are thoroughly in place for overseas transfers of personal information, to immediately destroy any unnecessary prompt input content already transferred to Volcano Corporation, and to continuously enhance service transparency through the disclosure and specification of the Korean privacy policy.
Tonight, as discussions around the potential Russia-Ukraine peace deal intensify, one key point of contention keeps coming up: Crimea. Now, this peninsula, seized by Russia from Ukraine back in 2014, sits at the heart of a major east-west standoff. And to understand why it's so crucial, let's take a closer look at its location and the history that makes it such a contested territory. The strategic importance of Crimea has been recognized for decades, even back in 2008. Concerns were being raised about the presence of the Russian Black Sea Fleet based in Sevastopol and the potential implications for Ukraine's sovereignty.
It's at the northern end of the Black Sea and at the south of Ukraine. It plays a very strategic role in overseeing Black Sea maritime activity. One of the other parts of that agreement that we discussed earlier that came in the 1990s was that Russia leased the Black Sea naval base in Sevastopol on the southwestern side of Crimea, allowing it to continue to use those port facilities to project naval power through the Black Sea. Russia annexed it in 2014 after organizing a sham referendum, taking advantage of essentially the brief collapse of the Ukrainian state in the aftermath of the Maidan revolution, which Russia very heavily opposed, seeking to keep in power the Yanukovych regime that was in office before then. Yanukovych even briefly fled to Crimea before going to the rest of Russia. Russia used its strategy of bringing in so-called little green men. Putin denied that they were involved in the operations there and claimed that it was entirely an indigenous movement to call for unification with Russia. However, later admitted that this was entirely false, handed out medals for the operations in Crimea that have a beginning date on the 21st of February, right at the end, or at the apex of the Ukrainian Revolution in 2014. And many of the leadership of that military effort then went on to play key roles in the Russian-backed insurgency and invasion of the Donbass later in 2014, and even today in the full-scale invasion of Ukraine that's been going on for just over 3 years now.
Now, the future of Crimea is once again a major point of discussion, particularly as some push for a resolution to the ongoing conflict. The idea of potentially recognizing Russia's claim to Crimea has been floated. But as Maximilian has explained, this could have significant implications for any negotiation.
Were Trump to unilaterally recognize Crimea as Russian territory right now, he would be immediately giving up perhaps the most important negotiating card in all of these discussions, seemingly for nothing in return. Ukraine, of course, has insisted on full restoration of its pre-2014 boundaries, but there has been a lot of acknowledgement within Ukrainian political circles and even in the discussions that were held in 2022 about a ceasefire that Ukraine would at least no longer press its claim against Russia for the return of Crimea and allow that to sort of remain unsettled, but also to go unchallenged.
Ever dream of riding your very own robotic beast? Well, the engineers at Kawasaki Robotics certainly have. They've just unveiled a wild concept, a ride-on robotic lion that they actually think could be prowling our world by the year 2050. Take a look.
This rideable robot, with its four-legged stability, allows anyone to easily access places that were previously difficult to reach with traditional wheels, even enabling exploration up in the mountains. It is equipped with a generator based on a motorcycle engine, which produces electricity to power the motors. As for the controls, it also follows a motorcycle-inspired approach, using shifts in the rider's body weight to steer. Direction control is achieved through weight shift.
And with that, we end tonight's broadcast. For everyone here on NET25, I'm Alma Angeles. Thank you all for joining us. Good night.